The stadium was trembling, not in the poetic sense. Not in the way sports writers describe the buzz of a sold-out game or how critics talk about a concert's atmosphere. The concrete under thousands of feet was literally shaking. 25,000 fans had filled the open-air stadium to its brim, and every one of them was chanting the same two words with the rhythm of a war drum. Michael, Michael, Michael. The roar wasn't just loud, it was alive. It bounced off steel girders, ricocheted through the open night, and settled into the bones of anyone lucky enough to be inside. Cell phone flashbulbs flickered like a galaxy of stars. Cameras swung wildly, and fans stood on their seats, arms outstretched, straining just to catch the first glimpse of the man they'd waited hours, some days, to see. Backstage, beyond the glow of the lights, Michael Jackson stood in the narrow corridor that led to the stage. He was motionless, save for the rhythmic tap of his black, polished shoes on the floor. The sequins of his jacket glittered under the dim work lights, each tiny reflection trembling with his shallow breaths. Normally, Michael had a ritual before stepping on stage. He'd pace, crack a few quiet jokes with his crew, maybe hum a warm-up phrase or practice a spin in the shadows. But tonight was different. Tonight, he wasn't humming. He wasn't smiling. His gloved hand rested lightly on the microphone, and his dark eyes stared straight ahead at the curtain, as though he were watching the future unfold before it happened. "Mike," whispered Karen Fay, his makeup artist and longtime friend. "You good?" He didn't look at her, but his lips curled into the faintest smile. Tonight, they're not ready for this. Karen frowned, but before she could press, a stagehand's headset crackled. 1 minute to curtain. The words jolted the crew into motion. Band members slid into position. Dancers stretched their legs, bouncing on their toes, adrenaline making their movements jittery. A lighting technician crouched at his console, hands trembling as he prepared for blast of the opening sequence. But all of them, every dancer, every tech, every assistant, felt it. Michael had told them there would be a special guest tonight. He'd kept the name secret, even from most of the team. He called it the surprise. Only his closest confidants knew, and even they didn't know exactly when or how the reveal would happen. The mystery hung over the crew like the charge before a lightning strike. And then the lights dropped. The stadium, moment ago thunderous, fell into sudden, disorienting darkness. For a breathless instant, there was silence. The crowd inhaled all at once, a collective gasp that made the air itself feel heavier. Then the first boom of the bass drum shattered the silence. The stage lit up in a violent explosion of white and gold, fireworks erupting from either side. A blinding spotlight cut through the smoke and landed center stage. There he was, Michael Jackson. The crowd detonated. The sound was primal. 25,000 voices screaming at once, hands thrown into the air, bodies leaping like a single organism convulsing with joy. He stood perfectly still, his black fedora tilted low, face in shadow, sequin jacket glinting like liquid stars. He hadn't sung a word, hadn't moved a muscle, but he didn't need to, just standing there. He owned the night. Fans collapsed against each other in tears. Some fainted outright, security rushing forward to catch them. Others screamed his name until their voices cracked, holding up handmade posters, photos, vinyl records, anything they hoped he might see. But Michael didn't move. Not yet. The band was waiting for his cue. The dancers were waiting for his signal. The crowd was already wild, but Michael let the moment stretch longer than usual. He tilted his head just slightly, as though he were listening to something beyond the chaos. Then he lifted the microphone to his lips. Tonight! His voice was soft, almost lost in a sea of noise. The crowd hushed instantly, leaning in, desperate for every word. Tonight is different. The roar erupted again, screams slicing the air. Michael raised his hand, palm out. The stadium went quiet once more. It was uncanny, as if the entire audience had been rehearsed. "I don't stand here alone," he said, his voice low but pulsing with intensity. "There's someone here tonight who means the world to me. Someone I want you all to meet." The crowd screamed again, but this time it was different. Not just excitement, but raw speculation. A tidal wave of guesses raced through the stands. "Prince," someone yelled. "Stevie Wonder," another cried. No way, it's Diana Ross. Backstage, Karen glanced at Michael, eyes wide. He's really going to do it, she thought. On stage, Michael finally moved. He slid forward in that signature, effortless glide, each step smoother than water flowing downhill. The audience exploded again, their voices a wall of thunder that rolled and rolled. But Michael wasn't feeding off it the way he usually did. He wasn't teasing them with spins or flashes of choreography. He was leading them somewhere. Every look, every pause, every cryptic word was a breadcrumb on the trail to something greater. He paused at center stage, lifting his head so the lights caught his face. His eyes sparkled, but his expression was unreadable. "You came here tonight for music," he said. "But music is more than sound. Music is love. Music is family. Music is history." The words echoed to the stadium, carried on the reverb of the speakers, bouncing into every corner of the crowd. People were leaning on the rails, clutching their friends, tears already in their eyes, sensing something bigger than a concert was happening. Michael let the silence return, his breathing steady. He glanced toward the wings of the stage, a fleeting, almost imperceptible look. But the fans caught it. Cameras zoomed, heads turned. "Tonight," Michael whispered into the mic, "I brought someone with me." The crowd exploded again, this time louder than before. The anticipation became unbearable. Fans stamped their feet, shook the stands, screamed guesses at the top of their lungs. Michael just smiled, that slow, knowing, dangerous smile. And then he stepped back into the shadows of the spotlight, letting the tension hang heavy in the air. Act One ended not with song, not with a dance, but with a promise that this would not be an ordinary concert. This was going to be history. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. The stage pulsed with golden light as the crowd roared, but Michael didn't rush. That was his gift. He could stand still and hold 25,000 hearts in the palm of his hand, stretching time until anticipation burned hotter than the pyrotechnics behind him. "Someone with me tonight," he repeated softly, almost like a secret. The microphone caught the words, amplifying them into something sacred. The crowd shrieked. In the front rows, fans clutched at the barricades, faces tilted upward as if staring at a prophet. Farther back, hands reached for the sky, thousands of arms waving like a sea of branches in a storm. Every single person, from the die-hard fans who had camped outside for days to the casual concert-goers who had come out of curiosity, leaned forward, desperate to know who Michael had brought. But Michael was a master of suspense. He wasn't about to reveal the mystery yet. Instead, the music swelled. The opening chords of Billie Jean rippled through the speakers, smooth and haunting. The stadium erupted again, screams climbing into night air, echoing off the steel roof. Michael tilted his head down, fedora shadowing his face. The single white glove lifted, catching the spotlight like a diamond. A ripple of recognition shot through the crowd. He bent his knees, snapped into position, and the stadium erupted in seismic applause. He gave them the moves they knew, the ones burned into history. The quick step, the spin, the sharp freeze in perfect silhouette. Every motion was surgical, flawless, yet somehow charged with raw emotion. But even as he moved, even as he gave them Billie Jean with all the fire and perfection that only Michael Jackson could deliver, the mystery lingered. Fans whispered between screams, their voices trembling with speculation. Who's here tonight? Is it family? Maybe Janet. No, he said history. What if it's bigger? Michael seemed to feed on it. His voice slid over the lyrics like silk, every note cutting clean through the night. But in the pauses, in the spaces between verses, he added cryptic words. "You don't know what's coming," he murmured. "Wait until you see. This is bigger than me." The fans screamed at every tease. Their excitement was no longer just for music. It was for the unknown, the secret he was dangling in front of them like a magician before the grand reveal. By the time the last chorus rang out and Michael slid into his final pose, the entire crowd was trembling. The applause was deafening, echoing like thunder through the stadium. But Michael didn't bask in it for long. He straightened, catching his breath, sweat glistening on his brow under the lights. Then he raised the microphone again. His voice was lower now, hushed, but the crowd silenced itself instantly. "You've been with me for years," he said. "Through every song, every album, every tour. You've given me more love than one man could ever deserve." His voice cracked just slightly on the word love, and the crowd let out a wave of screams and cheers. "But tonight isn't about me." The words hit like lightning. A murmur swept through the audience, followed quickly by shrieks of speculation. Michael smiled faintly, eyes twinkling as if he alone knew the ending to a story the world had been waiting to hear. He took a few steps forward, closer to the edge of the stage. Security guards tensed as fans reached out, straining their fingers toward him. Michael extended his hand out for a moment, not quite touching, but close enough that the front row dissolved into sobs. "Music is family," he said. "Music is unity. And sometimes music is about bringing people together you never thought you'd see standing in the same place." The crowd exploded again. From the corner of the stage, a spotlight swept suddenly across the wings, illuminating the shadows for just a split second before pulling away. Gasps erupted in the stands. People swore they saw a figure waiting there, a silhouette half hidden in the dark. "Who was that?" "I saw someone." "Play it back." Someone recorded. The energy in the stadium shifted. It wasn't just excitement now. It was frenzy. Phones shot into the air, recording everything, desperate to capture proof of the figure. Michael turned back to band and gave them a subtle nod. The opening riff of Beat It blasted through the speakers, sharp and electric. The fans lost their minds all over again. But this performance wasn't the same as the one before. Something was different. Halfway through the song, Michael danced across the stage with his usual fire, but during guitar solo, he stopped dead center, turned toward the wings, and extended his hand. The spotlight followed his gesture, sweeping across the stage until it froze again on that same shadowy corner. A figure stepped forward just slightly, still hidden enough to be unrecognizable, but enough to send the crowd into chaos. The screams were deafening. Michael grinned, spinning back to the audience. "Not yet," he teased. "You're not ready yet." The audience screamed louder, chanting, pleading, crying out guesses that drowned even the pounding guitars. The atmosphere was electric, a storm bottled up inside the stadium walls. By the time Beat It ended, half the crowd was hoarse from screaming. Michael collapsed to his knees in a dramatic finish, arms spread wide, face tilted toward the heavens. The lights dimmed, leaving him in a single halo of white light. He rose slowly, almost reverently, and walked back toward the microphone stand. His chest heaved, his breathing heavy, but his eyes burned with intensity. "Tonight," his voice carried through the silence like a prayer. "Tonight, you will see something no one has ever seen before. Not on TV, not on stage, not anywhere." He paused. The silence was absolute. "Tonight, I share my stage with someone who changed my life, and who's about to change yours." The crowd erupted so violently that the stands themselves seemed to shake. Some fans screamed names, others sobbed openly, while thousands chanted, "Bring them out! Bring them out!" But Michael didn't. Not yet. He was the king of suspense. Instead, he walked slowly to the very edge of the stage, crouched down, and looked directly at the fans in the front row. His voice softened to almost a whisper, yet somehow everyone heard. "You'll remember this night forever." The crowd lost control. Fans clutched each other. Some collapsed, and chants broke out across the stadium. The air was no longer just electric. It was volcanic, ready to erupt. Michael stood, his silhouette glowing against the flood of lights behind him, and raised the microphone high. The band hit a low, ominous note. The lights dimmed again. The figure in the wings shifted once more, visible only in glimpses. And as Act Two closed, the audience knew one thing. The mystery guest was real, and the reveal was going to change everything. The stage was dark again, smoke curling upward in slow, ghostly streams. Michael stood center stage, motionless, his sequin jacket catching what little light remained. The crowd was in pieces. 25,000 people chanting, pleading, screaming, praying for him to finally reveal who he had brought with him. "Are you ready?" Michael's voice rang out, low but resonant. The stadium erupted. The noise was beyond sound. It was vibration, shaking the rafters, rattling water bottles, thudding in every chest like a second heartbeat. Fans stomped their feet, shaking the concrete beneath them. Michael tilted his head, that sly half-smile playing across his lips. He stretched out his hand toward the wings again. A spotlight followed, but still only shadows. "Not yet," he teased. The crowd roared in frustration and delight. He chuckled softly, the sound barely audible over the screams, but enough to push them higher. And then silence. It wasn't gradual. It was sudden, like someone had pulled the power from the sky. The lights cut out completely. The band froze mid-chord. The screens went black. Only the collective gasp of 25,000 voices remained. A single note rang out. A piano. Soft. Familiar. The audience held its breath. Michael lowered his head as the spotlight hit him again. His voice was soft, but it carried like a gospel through the silence. "There are people you meet once in your life," he said, "who change everything. People who inspire you, who remind you what music is really for." He paused, gloved hand tightening around the microphone. "And sometimes, if you're lucky, those people never really leave." The piano grew louder. A melody everyone knew, a song etched into history. The opening bars of Imagine. The crowd gasped as one. Then the screams began, wild, incoherent, disbelieving, because walking slowly, calmly, into the light was a figure the world never thought it would see on stage again. John Lennon. The stadium exploded. Screams turned to sobs, sobs turned to chants. Thousands of hands flew to mouths. Some fans collapsed onto each other, unable to believe their eyes. Phones shook wildly as people tried to record through their tears. It didn't matter how impossible it seemed, or that John had been gone for decades. At that moment, under the white-hot lights, it was as if he had stepped right out of history and into the present. Michael's eyes were glassy, shimmering with emotion. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of reverence, as Lennon walked to center stage beside him. The two stood shoulder to shoulder, and the sight alone was enough to shake the audience to its core. Michael raised the microphone again, voice trembling. "You gave the world a dream," he said, looking at Lennon. "And tonight we dream again." The piano swelled. John took the mic, his voice low, steady, instantly recognizable. "Imagine there's no heaven." The stadium froze. Every camera, every phone, every eye was locked onto the stage. Tears streaked faces across the crowd. People clutched strangers beside them, united in shock and awe. Michael joined on the second verse, his velvet voice blending with Lennon's raw, iconic tone. The harmony was almost too much to bear. Two legends, one gone too soon, the other still carrying the world's expectations on his shoulders, now singing together as if time itself had bent to allow it. Fans wept openly. Some screamed so loudly their voices broke, but most simply stood in stunned silence, listening to the impossible unfold before them. By the chorus, the entire stadium had joined in. 25,000 voices sang. "You may say I'm a dreamer." The words shook the night sky. They weren't just lyrics anymore. They were an anthem of hope, resurrected in the most miraculous way imaginable. Michael stepped back for a moment, letting Lennon's voice carry the verse. His chest heaved with emotion, his gloved hand pressed against his heart. He scanned the audience, seeing not fans now, but a sea of believers, people who knew they would never forget what they were witnessing. When the song ended, there was no pause, no moment of silence. The eruption was immediate and deafening. The stadium roared, people screaming Lennon's name, screaming Michael's, sobbing into the shoulders of strangers. Michael raised his hand again, quieting the wave. His voice cracked slightly when he spoke. "I told you tonight would be history," he said, glancing at Lennon. "This man is my hero, my teacher, my brother. And tonight, he stands with us." The crowd exploded again. Some fans fainted outright. Medics rushed down the aisles. But even as they worked, those being helped reached trembling hands back toward the stage. Michael turned back to Lennon, and the two embraced briefly. The image of it, two icons from different eras, locked in a moment of brotherhood, sent the audience into another frenzy. Then Michael leaned toward the mic. "But we're not done yet." The audience lost its mind. Could there be more? Could the night get any bigger than this? Michael nodded to the band. The lights shifted again, pulsing red and blue. The heavy bass line of "Come Together" blasted from the speakers, and the crowd erupted. John Lennon stepped forward, gripping the microphone with both hands, belting the opening line with a rawness that cut through every corner of the stadium. Michael danced beside him, sliding, spinning, electrifying the crowd with every move. The two of them together, Lennon's grit and Michael's fire, created something almost supernatural. Fans were in hysterics. Some stood frozen in disbelief, hands pressed to their mouths. Others jumped wildly, unable to contain the energy surging through them. By the end of the song, the audience wasn't just watching a concert. They were part of a resurrection, a miracle, a collision of music and history that defied reality. Michael stood at center stage, panting, sweat glistening under the lights. Lennon stood beside him, smiling faintly, soaking in the adoration of thousands. Michael's voice broke the chaos. "Do you believe in magic now?" The crowd screamed so loud it drowned out the echo of his words. Act 3 ended with the impossible made real, with the mystery guest revealed, and with 25,000 souls united in a single thought. They had just witnessed the most legendary moment in music history. The crowd had screamed themselves hoarse, but still they wouldn't stop. 25,000 voices echoed Michael's words. Magic history. Impossible. Security guards at the barricades shook their heads in disbelief. Seasoned veterans who thought they'd seen it all, now blinking away tears as they tried to process what they had just witnessed. John Lennon on stage, alive, singing beside Michael Jackson. Michael lifted his hand again, signaling for calm. The roar softened into a low, trembling hum, like the earth itself was vibrating beneath the stadium. He stood at the microphone, Lennon at his side, both men breathing heavily under the hot lights. "Tonight," Michael began, voice shaking with sincerity, "isn't just about a show. Tonight is about hope. Tonight is about remembering what music can do." The audience cheered, then hushed again as Michael's tone dropped lower. "There were nights I felt alone," he continued. "Nights when the world seemed so heavy I didn't know how to stand under it. And I'd put on a record, and I'd hear this man's voice." He gestured to Lennon, who smiled faintly, bowing his head. "And I'd remember why we fight, why we create, why we dream." The crowd erupted in applause, the sound rolling like waves across the stands. Some fans shouted Lennon's name, others Michael's, but most simply cried. John stepped forward, his voice rough but steady, carrying the weight of decades. "When I wrote those songs, Imagine, Come Together, Give Peace a Chance, I didn't know if they'd last. I didn't know if anyone would remember." He scanned the audience, his eyes shimmering. "But looking at you now, I see that music doesn't die. Love doesn't die. It lives here in you." The words sent a shock through the stadium. Fans erupted again, screaming so loud the sound distorted through microphones. People clutched strangers, united in awe. Michael raised his microphone, his eyes bright. "We want to sing one more for you. A song about never letting go, no matter what they say, no matter how they try to break you down." The band shifted. A hush spread across the arena as the opening chords of "Heal the World" floated through the speakers. The song's soft melody seemed almost fragile compared to the thunder of what had come before, but within moments, the fragility became strength. Michael started, his voice tender, vulnerable. "Heal the world, make it a better place." Lennon's voice joined him on the harmony. The blend was staggering. Michael's angelic clarity and Lennon's raw edge twined together like two sides of the same truth. The crowd dissolved into sobs. Parents hugged children. Strangers wrapped arms around each other. People sang through their tears. The giant LED screens above the stage lit up, showing not just Michael and Lennon, but faces from the audience. Fans crying, smiling, holding hands. For the first time that night, the spotlight wasn't just on the performers. It was on the people who had carried their music for decades. Michael turned away from the mic and walked to the edge of the stage. He reached down, grasping the hand of a young girl pressed against the barricade. Her face crumpled into tears as he helped her stand. The camera zoomed in as he gently lifted her onto the stage. "Sing with us," Michael whispered, handing her a mic. The girl trembled, her tiny voice cracking as she joined in. "For you and for me." The stadium erupted again, this time not with screams, but with a wave of applause so heartfelt it shook the night sky. Lennon smiled broadly, stepping closer to the girl, harmonizing with her as though she'd been part of the song all along. It was no longer a concert. It was a prayer. By the final chorus, the entire stadium was singing. 25,000 voices, one unified choir. Heal the world we live in. Save it for our children. Michael closed his eyes, tears streaming down his cheeks. His voice soared over the crowd, not polished, not perfect, but pure. Lennon's voice intertwined with his, gravel and silk, past and present. Two ghosts of music colliding into one moment that felt eternal. When the song ended, the silence that followed was almost unbearable. The stadium, moments ago deafening, now sat in reverent stillness. Michael bowed his head. Lennon raised his hand in quiet acknowledgement. Then, like a dam breaking, the applause surged. It was more than clapping. It was stomping, screaming, crying, chanting. Fans jumped in place, waving their arms, desperate to release the overwhelming energy that filled them. Michael looked at Lennon, his expression unreadable, caught between joy and grief. "They love you," he whispered. John chuckled softly, his Liverpool accent warm. "They love us." Michael turned back to the crowd, voice trembling. "You see? This is why we do it. Not for money, not for fame, but because when music is true, it heals. It unites. It brings back the ones we thought we lost." The crowd roared again, a tidal wave of emotion surging across the arena. And then Michael did something unexpected. He lowered the microphone and stepped aside, gesturing toward Lennon. "Your turn," he said simply. John took a deep breath. He looked out across the crowd, 25,000 faces illuminated by the glow of phones and stage lights. For a moment, he just stood there, soaking it in. Then he spoke. "This world's a tough place," he said. "They'll tell you to hate. They'll tell you to fight. They'll tell you it's hopeless. But I'm telling you," his voice cracked, and he paused to swallow hard. "I'm telling you that every single person here tonight proved them wrong. Because look at you. Look at all of you. You came together." The audience erupted again, chanting his name. "Lennon! Lennon! Lennon!" He laughed, shaking his head. "Nah, don't chant my name. Chant peace. Chant love. That's what matters." The chant shifted. 25,000 people screaming. "Peace. Love. Peace. Love." The stadium shook with it, the sound spilling into the night sky, echoing across the city. Michael wiped his eyes with the back of his glove. He leaned into the microphone, voice quiet. "This is bigger than us. Bigger than music. Bigger than history. This is what the world needs right now." Lennon stepped back, nodding in agreement. Michael took his hand, raised it high, and the image froze on the screens above them. Two icons side by side, united in message, in music, in hope. The crowd went ballistic, stamping their feet, fists pumping in rhythm. It wasn't applause anymore. It was a movement. And for the first time that night, Michael let the roar wash over him without speaking. He didn't rush to the next song, didn't tease the next surprise. He simply stood there, breathing it in, knowing this wasn't just a concert anymore. It was something eternal. Act 4 ended not with spectacle, but with silence transformed into reverence, with fans leaving their voices in the rafters and their hearts on the stage. And in the middle of it all, Michael and Lennon stood hand in hand, two men from different eras, bound by the same mission, to heal the world through music. The stadium was trembling again, but this time it wasn't from anticipation. It was from release. 25,000 people had screamed, cried, and sung until their voices were ragged, and yet the energy still surged, uncontainable. They weren't just watching history. They were part of it. Michael and Lennon stood side by side in the white-hot glow of the spotlights, sweat on their brows, chests heaving, but smiles tugging at their lips. Neither man had to say anything for the crowd to understand. This night was already immortal. But Michael wasn't finished. He raised his hand for silence. Slowly, reluctantly, the crowd calmed, though the air still pulsed with electric energy. He stepped to the microphone, his gloved hand gripping it tight. "Before tonight," Michael said softly, "people told me not to dream too big. They said music is just entertainment. They said it couldn't change the world." The crowd booed, shouting their disagreement. Michael shook his head gently. "But I always believed," he continued. "I believed music could heal. Music could connect. And tonight," he glanced at Lennon beside him, voice trembling, "tonight you've proven me right." The crowd erupted again, stomping, clapping, screaming his name. John Lennon leaned into his microphone, his Liverpool drawl rough and heartfelt. "You've given us something tonight, too. You've shown us what it looks like when love wins. Don't let it stop here. Don't let this be just one night. Carry it out there." He pointed toward the horizon, toward the city shimmering with lights beyond the stadium. "Carry it into the world." The crowd roared so loudly it seemed the stadium might collapse under the weight of their voices. Michael nodded to the band, and the opening riff of Man in the Mirror filled the air. The audience erupted with cheers that melted almost instantly into singing. They knew every word, and they sang it like their lives depended on it. Michael's voice soared over them, trembling with emotion, but stronger than ever. "I'm started with the Man in the Mirror." Lennon joined in on the harmony, his rawness sharpening the edges of Michael's smooth power. The pairing was surreal. Two voices from different worlds crashing into one anthem. The stadium shook as the chorus swelled, not just sung by the men on stage, but by the thousands of people in the stands who shouted the lyrics as though they had become a vow. And no message could have been any clearer. The giant LED screen split into a collage of faces in the audience. Crying teenagers, middle-aged fans clutching their chests, elderly couples swaying together. Every single one united by the same song. It was no longer Michael's solo. It wasn't even Michael and Lennon's duet. It was a choir of 25,000, each voice layering into something bigger than sound, a declaration. By the final chorus, Michael had turned his microphone toward the crowd. He stood back, watching with tears in his eyes as the audience carried the song, their voices crashing through the night sky. Lennon strummed an acoustic guitar gently, underscoring their chorus like a heartbeat. The last line echoed, "Make that change." The lights dropped to near darkness. Only Michael and Lennon remained illuminated in a narrow beam of white. The silence that followed was heavier than any roar. Fans clutched each other, mouths open, unable to speak. Some wept openly. Others simply stared, unwilling to blink for fear they'd miss something. Michael finally broke the silence. "Do you feel it?" The crowd screamed. "Do you believe it?" Another explosion of sound. "Then carry it with you," Michael said, his voice cracking with passion. "When you leave here tonight, you take this love, this unity, this magic, and you don't let it go, because the world needs it." John stepped forward, putting an arm across Michael's shoulders. "Don't just remember tonight," he said firmly. "Repeat it, live it, be it." The stadium roared again, chants echoing, "Peace, love, peace, love." Michael and Lennon exchanged one final look. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't planned, but it was understood. Michael whispered into the mic, "One more." The band struck up the unmistakable chords of Imagine. The crowd screamed as Lennon took the lead, his voice ragged but resonant. Imagine all the people living life in peace. Michael joined, sliding in on the harmony, his voice soaring above Lennon's in perfect counterpoint. The two of them together, singing about peace, about unity, about love. It was too much. Fans collapsed in tears. Some clutched their hearts, overwhelmed. Others simply stood still, hands pressed to their faces, shaking their heads in disbelief. By the final chorus, the crowd had joined again, louder than ever before. You may say I'm a dreamer. 25,000 voices. But I'm not the only one. Hands swayed in the air, glowing phone lights turning the stadium into a sea of stars. I hope someday you'll join us. Michael closed his eyes, holding Lennon's hand as they sang. And the world will be as one. The music faded, but the voices of the crowd continued, unaccompanied, echoing the chorus into the night. Michael lowered his Mike Lennon, set down his guitar. Together, they just stood there, listening as 25,000 people carried the dream forward. Finally, the last voices trailed into silence. Michael stepped forward one last time. His voice was barely above a whisper, but the stadium was so still that everyone heard. Remember this night, because you'll never see anything like it again. The lights cut. The stage went black. 4-3 heartbeats. There was nothing, just silence. And then the explosion. Fireworks blasted into the night sky, raining sparks of gold and red above the stadium. The crowd erupted into a roar that could have been heard for miles. People screamed, cried, hugged strangers, collapsing under the weight of what they had just experienced. When the lights came back, the stage was empty. Michael was gone. Lennon was gone. Only the echo of their voices remained, drifting through the air like smoke. For hours after, fans lingered in the stands. They didn't want to leave. They couldn't. Some sat in stunned silence, staring at the empty stage. Others sobbed, clutching their friends. Many simply kept repeating the same words, over and over. I can't believe it. I can't believe I saw that. And maybe that was the point, because on that night, Michael Jackson hadn't just brought a mystery guest on stage. He had brought back hope. He had resurrected the dream that music could change the world. And in doing so, he etched a night so powerful, so unexplainable, that no one who was there and no one who ever heard about it would ever forget. For the rest of their lives, those 25,000 people would say the same thing. I was there. I saw it. I heard it. I felt it. And the world was never the same again. If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.